Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Green Earth Podcast. I'm Pedro Zimmer, your host, and today we're turning a desert into a forest, or at least getting started. But before we begin, I'd like to remind you that the Green Earth Podcast is a Green Earth initiative. Green Earth is a large-scale nature-based project developer, and our goal is to help nature flourish and prosper. If you want to read more about our projects, please check our website, green.earth. The link is also in the description. But now, with no further ado, let's explore what happened and how we can save the Aral Sea. Once the world's fourth largest lake, it has now become arguably one of the planet's most catastrophic environmental disasters. The Aral Sea is located in Central Asia. It wasn't really part of the ocean, it was a saltwater lake lying between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. It used to have an area of about 68,000 kilometers squared, which is about the size of Ireland, or twice the size of Belgium, or about 9.5 million football fields, or 1.5 trillion footballs. It was an extremely important asset for the region. It supported the entire local economy, which was basically the fishing industry, shipyards, entire towns, and it was also one of the central pieces of ecological and climate control of the area, which was crucial for agriculture. What basically happened was the rivers that fed the Aral Sea were diverted by the Soviet Union in the 1960s. That was done in order to supply water for cotton crops, and that worked really well for the crops for some time. Not so well for the lake. With no water supply, the Aral Sea started to evaporate. What once was a massive saltwater lake with fishing boats sailing around and multiple species living and thriving in it became the vision of the worst environmental nightmare one could think of. The scenario is really one out of science fiction movies. Instead of water, now there are stranded boats in the middle of the desert, salt and dust everywhere, and even if you do find water, it's way too salty and toxic, making it impossible for any life to thrive in this place. And that's what we want to change. But turns out that it's not as simple as turning the faucet back on. Ever since the diversion, a bunch of other cities and economies became dependent on that water that was diverted. We know it's impossible to revert what was done, and the Aral Sea will never be the massive lake that it once was. But what if we could transform it into something else? Something less salty, something alive. The idea is to transform the area with steppe vegetation, allowing for a gradual transition into a more biodiverse and alive environment. First, we need to address the two biggest problems in the area. It's too dry and too salty. It all starts with two plant species, the Saxaul and the Tamarisk. The Saxaul can help with the too dry part. You see, the reason most plants don't like sand isn't just because it's coarse, irritating, and gets everywhere. Sand is also very bad at storing water and moisture. Its particles are too large and not very porous, so it's very easy for water to evaporate. So that water doesn't stay in the soil long enough for the plants to absorb it. But the Saxaul has an extensive root system that can go 10 meters deep into the soil to access potential water sources. It also has features like very small leaves and a sort of waxy coating over its branches, which maximizes all water retention that's possible. It doesn't really like salt that much though, and that is where the Tamarisk comes in. The Tamarisk usually needs more water than the Saxaul, but it actually likes salty soil. And the interesting thing about it is that Tamarisk in other regions, like in the US, is actually considered a sort of problematic weed, and that's because in order to tolerate the soil with high salinity, it developed a mechanism of secreting excess salt, which usually elevates the salinity of the soil around it. However, the Aral Sea situation is so extreme, it actually works the other way around. It's worth to have the tamarisk growing there because it actually helps control the extreme soil salinity. If this is starting to sound way too complicated, don't worry, it is. And that's why I talked to Rieks Bosch. Rieks Bosch is a nature-based solutions expert who specializes in carbon sequestration projects across steppe, desert, and coastal ecosystems. We had a very interesting conversation, and you can check out the whole thing on another episode of this podcast. But basically, I wanted to understand, how does this work? How can you possibly go from a dry, salty wasteland to a thriving environment with multiple species and even animals living there? How do you make trees grow in the desert?
We can't plant them all. That is too costly. So what you do is you take primary vegetation, creating an environment for other vegetation. Now, Saxaul is one of them, Tamarisk is one of them.
As with anything, you start with one step at a time. And as Rieks said, the Saxaul and the Tamarisk take the role of primary vegetation and set the environment up to receive new species. We can't plant a natural habitat in its entirety. After all, we want it to be sustainable even if humans never set foot there again. After only 5 years, you can expect to see some grass and herbs naturally occurring in the shade of the Saxaul. This plant literally creates its own ecosystem and can naturally double the vegetation without the need of any additional planting. But now you might be wondering, what's the point of all this? Are we doing it just because trees are cool? Well, why not? Trees are pretty cool, and we should definitely have more of them in the planet, especially in the Aral Sea. But of course, there are more reasons than that. You see, when the water evaporated, it created multiple problems not only for the fish, but also for the people who lived next to them. You see, in the past, of course, the Aral Sea was an extremely important asset for the Soviet fishing industry, employing tens of thousands of people. And as the water evaporated, so did the industry. Today, Aral, one of the main fishing ports of the Aral Sea, is a ship graveyard, 15 kilometers away from the water, and the people either left the region or had to find other occupations. On top of that, the salty soil is also contaminated by runoff of pesticides, fertilizer, industrial waste, and even remainders from weapons testing. If you combine this with the extremely dry and windy weather, you get the perfect recipe for disaster: toxic dust storms. Dust storms are already pretty dangerous, but toxic and salty dust storms are on a whole new level. Besides ruining nearby crops, they also pose a much higher risk for people and animals that breathe in dust particles, and trees can help avoid that. Remember when I mentioned that the Saxaul had really deep and complex root systems? That's extremely helpful to keep the soil on the ground and avoid dust storms. Also, remember, it's not just the Saxaul and the Tamarisk. Many other herbs will start growing around it, and they actually help for the next reason we want to save the Aral Sea: livestock. I know, increasing animal agriculture probably isn't the very first thing you thought of doing to transform a salty desert into a thriving, sustainable ecosystem. I also didn't think about that at first, so I had to ask Rieks, what's the thought process behind this?
Yeah, you get that the organic matter is quickly doubling, and that means that the water capacity of the soil is also slowly increasing. Not so much by Saxaul or by trees, but by the vegetation under it. You see that's increasing. Then they said, yeah, what can we further do to stimulate the growth here? I said, once a year, grazing, soft grazing, 50%, 70% grazing, and then it goes even quicker, because then the manure, the seeds are tramped into the soil, and then the combination of shade, the concentration of water on some spots, because the trees are planted in holes, and then you see a whole new vegetation is coming up.
By introducing livestock grazing in an organized manner in the region, we can accelerate the growth of this ecosystem with natural processes. Besides, grazing is essential for the health of any steppe ecosystems. Animals help by trampling seeds on the ground, transporting them to different places, eating overgrowing grass or herbs, guaranteeing more balance between species. The manure from these animals is also very important for soil health, as steppe has by nature very low phosphate, which can be found in the manure. Besides, it's a huge economic opportunity. Because speaking of the livestock itself, even with the Saxaul, tamarisk, herbs, and grasses, this is still a very harsh ecosystem, and there aren't many animals that are suited to thrive here. We'd be talking about certain species of cattle only and the steppe antelope. Now, the interesting thing about the types of cattle that do thrive in this very particular place is that they actually store fat inside their muscles, not around it. And this is very helpful for them to store energy, especially for the harsh winters of the region. This specific kind of fat storage is sometimes called marbling. If you're a foodie, you already know what I'm talking about and where I'm going with this. This type of meat, which has high marbling, is considered exceptionally high quality and it's highly sought after by top chefs worldwide. This means that this dry, salty wasteland can become productive again and profoundly change the economic situation of the area. We can't go back and undo what was done with the Aral Sea, but we can transform it into something better than what it is now. Something that's good for nature, that's good for humans, that's good for the economy, and to be honest, something that is actually our responsibility as human beings. If you want to hear more about this project, please check our website, green.earth. The Green Earth podcast is a Green Earth initiative, and Green Earth is a large-scale nature-based project developer, and our goal is to help nature flourish and prosper. If you want to read more about our projects, please check our website, green.earth. The link is also in the description. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please consider leaving us a review. And if you know anyone that might benefit from this content, we'd greatly appreciate your recommendation. I'm Pedro Zimmer, your host, and I hope to see you for the next episode of the Green Earth Podcast.